Part 2 of how me and my sisters almost got kidnapped. I called my mom and then she looked on the cameras downstairs and somebody was in the house. She never told me what the person was doing. I guess she just didn't want me worrying, but she called 911 right away. While my 2 little sisters were in the closet, my 6-year-old sister would not stop crying and I'm pretty sure the person downstairs heard her. At this time, my mom and her boyfriend were already on the way and so were the police. I heard him coming up the steps, so I quietly opened the closet door and promised my sisters that they would stay quiet and be calm no matter what. I didn't know what he was here for, so I hid in the side of the bed in front of the closet so that he would get to me before he got to the girls. I heard him just rummaging through stuff and stuff breaking. Then a couple minutes later, I hear the police sirens. Right as I hear the police sirens, I hear our bedroom windows smash. While trying to stay as calm as I can, 3 policemen bust down the door. They grab me and my sisters and take us outside. About 5 minutes after they take us outside and put us in the back of their car, my mom and her boyfriend shows up. About 20 minutes later after he was caught, they did notify us that he was wanted for murder of 2 younger girls and 1 adult male. About $10,000 of our stuff was either missing or broke. Then about a month later when we were capable to, we did move. Nothing has...
Storytime about how I saw my best friend's dad on a date with our ex-friend. My best friend Alex and I are both 17 years old. When we were younger, around 11 to 12 years old, we had a friend named Lauren. Alex has a really big house with a lot of cool stuff, so every week we would go over for a sleepover in her den. It would be me, her, Lauren, and a few other girls. Lauren started saying that she had a crush on Alex's dad, which we all thought was weird, but we kind of just ignored it. However, it started getting weirder when she started going into detail about wanting to be with him and have his children. Alex finally had enough and told her that it was going too far. She told her that if she kept saying things like this, then she wouldn't be able to come over anymore. It seemed like it got through to Lauren and everything was fine for a while. We eventually grew apart from Lauren, and even though we were still friends, she stopped hanging out with us over time. She would still talk about Alex's dad though, just not directly to Alex. At one point she even said she had given a BJ to him, but he wasn't even in the country when she said it happened. He was on vacation with Alex and her sisters at the time, so no one believed her. One day I went to a mall kind of far away with my brother and saw Lauren and Alex's dad together. They were being extremely affectionate and I snapped a picture of them because he's still married. This is when my brother told me that it's not our business and we need to stay out of it.
Story time about when a client came to get her nails done by me just because she thought I was messing with her boyfriend. So right off the jump, when this girl was booking her appointment, it was already like iffy. Like she was going back and forth. Like booking an appointment with me is simple. Inbox me about time.
My sister and I have always been mistaken as twins. I'm 19 and she's 16, but we had the same height, skin tone, and similar voice. She also has a habit of being a copycat, from the way I dress to hobbies, even piercings. I know it's cute if you look at it from the outside, but sometimes it gets annoying. Like, yeah, we are quite close too, but why does she always happen to pick up everything I pick up? One afternoon,
has anyone ever told you not to do something and that just made you want to do it more? For these 3 girls, their curiosity would lead to something terrifying. These girls went to high school together and one night they decided to have a sleepover. They were also fans of horror movies, so they thought it would be nice to rent one out and watch it. They eventually found a video rental store on the street corner and went inside. They would soon regret this decision. They asked a woman behind the counter if she had any suggestions for horror movies that they could watch. The woman said she had the perfect movie for them and went into the back room. Then one of the girls noticed that an old and rusted videotape was lying on the counter. She picked it up and was instantly curious, but things got intense when the woman came back. She slammed her hands down on the old videotape and pulled it away. She said, "That's not something you should be watching." The woman wouldn't say anything else, only that it was a home movie. Then she handed them a regular horror movie. The girls agreed to rent that one out instead, but one of the girls was still too curious. She wanted to know what was in that old tape, so when the woman wasn't looking, she put it in her purse and left with it. When the girls came home, they decided to watch the old tape together, but what they saw on there would both shock and terrify them. Follow for part 2. If you've ever thought about getting your ears pierced, don't do what she did. This is the urban legend about a girl in Japan who tried to do it, then ended up with horrifying consequences. So this young girl really wanted to get her ears pierced. After some pleading with her parents, they finally agreed and gave her some money to go do it. But instead, the girl kept the money and decided to pierce them herself and let her friend help her. They heated up a large needle and went for it one day. It was painful, but in the end, she was happy she could finally wear earrings. However, this wouldn't last long. One day in school, she felt an intense pain in her left ear. Her earlobe was itchy, and by the end of the day, she had a headache. She went into the bathroom and saw her ear was very inflamed. Then she looked closer and saw a piece of white string sticking out of her new piercing. She picked and pulled at it, which only made the string longer. Now it was hanging out of her earlobe. The string seemed to be endless. The more she pulled, the longer it got. Finally fed up, she took a pair of scissors and cut the string. Suddenly, everything went black. There was a burning pain in her ears and her eyes. She began to scream. In the hospital, it was revealed that it wasn't a piece of string at all. She had pulled out a piece of her optic nerve and cut it. She would be blind for the rest of her life. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you couldn't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch? In 1983, a group of scientists thought that a human without any senses would be able to perceive God, so they found an elderly man who volunteered to have all of his senses surgically destroyed for this experiment. He would be completely alone with his thoughts. After a few days, he claimed that he heard his dead wife speaking to him. Then he began naming the dead relatives of the scientists and only information that their dead relatives would know. After a week, he started throwing himself against a wall to try and feel some kind of pain, but he couldn't. He tried to claw at his non-functioning eyes, but he felt nothing. He began to yell, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 hours straight. In the end, he had to be physically restrained for weeks. When he turned his blind eyes and made direct eye contact for the first time with a scientist and said, "I have spoken to God, and he has abandoned us," before his heart stopped for no apparent reason.
Part 2 about how I was dating the school shooter. Like I said, I had never told him that I was friends with these girls because they were controversial, but he would go on for hours about how much he hated these girls. He went as far to say that he wanted to kill them. I didn't think anything of it at first, because him and I had more of a sarcastic sense of humor, but he started to sound more and more serious every time that he would talk about it. Well, after us dating for 10 months, he calls me the one night, and he starts telling me about how he's going to shoot up the school. He had told me his entire plan of how he was going to do this. Now, he must have thought that we were like ride or die relationship, when in reality, I was recording everything that he was saying. After we got off the phone, I wrote an email to all of the office staff in my school, but I fell asleep and never finished the email. I woke up the next morning, finished it. I had texted my friends not to go to school that day. I had already missed the bus. I rode my bike to school that day. I ran to the principal's office, nobody was there, and that's whenever I heard shots in the hallway.
My fiance and I are getting married in a few months, and our wedding is on a Saturday. It's 3 days after his niece's 6th birthday. He has 2 nieces while I have 1. When we booked the date, we were aware that it was close to her birthday, but we figured because it was not on her actual day, it would be fine. His sister has recently asked if we could make our wedding a little bit more special for her daughter. She asked if she could pick out the dresses, for her to wear a tiara while the other 2 have simple headbands, and invite 1 school friend and 30 minutes to an hour of her music playing. She also wanted people to sing happy birthday to her. We said no to this. We want the flower girl dresses to all look the same and to go with the color scheme. Plus, we know that if the other girls see her wear a tiara, then they will also want one. We don't want some kid at our wedding who is not with their own parents. As for the music, it would be annoying, but all guests are welcome to request songs to the DJ. And I told her we can sing happy birthday after we cut our cake and we can bring her out a little cupcake. My sister-in-law is unhappy about this, because our wedding means her daughter will not get a birthday party that year. And she thinks waiting until the weekend after is too long and it will upset her daughter. My partner is starting to cave, but I don't want to budge. He feels bad in the situation, but I don't. Am I wrong for not having a birthday party at my wedding?
If you're ever driving late at night, don't do what they did. One night, a boy and his friend were on their way to a school dance when they saw a girl on the side of the road looking lost. They stopped the car and asked if she needed a ride, and she asked them to take her home. They said that they were going to a school dance and asked if she wanted to come too. She agreed. But these
Toxic best friend story time. So I had an off and on friendship with this one girl. In my freshman year, we became friends again. And she had this boyfriend named Nicholas. And they literally fought 24/7. And every time she would fight, she would be like, "Can you please fix this for me?" So she would have me add him on Snapchat, fix it, and then block him. And guys, this literally was happening like 5 times a week. And then after she asked me to do that the first few times, I realized she started going through my phone. And when I say my phone, I mean my whole motherfucking phone. A bitch was going through my Snapchats, DMs, text messages, and I didn't know how to confront her because that's just weird. So the one day I was getting ready at her house because we were about to go out, and she was like, "I'm grounding."
If you're ever driving late at night, don't do what they did. 2 boys picked up a girl on the side of the road while they were on their way to a school dance. In the car, she kept saying that she was cold, so one of the boys gave her his jacket. But when the night ended and they were about to drop her off, the girl accidentally left with the jacket. So the boys said that they would just come back the next day to get it. But when they came back and knocked on her door, they discovered something that would make them question what is real and what isn't. An old woman opened the door and asked them who they were looking for. After talking to her for a while, it was revealed that the girl they found on the side of the road was her daughter. But the thing is, she had been dead for 12 years. She was killed in a car accident at the same street corner they first saw her. The old woman pointed to a cemetery down the road and said, "That's where we buried her." The boys didn't believe her at first. They'd spent the whole night with this girl, so they knew that she had to be real. But they went to the cemetery and saw the boy's jacket draped over a gravestone. And on the gravestone was the girl's name and the date of her death. Exactly 12 years.
Story time about how I was dating the school shooter. Yeah. So a little background information. I was a sophomore whenever this all happened, and it was around October. Well, the one day I was sitting at lunch with my group of friends. We're all sitting there having a good time when one of my friends dares me to go over and sit with this one kid. And he was sitting alone, he was kind of shy, and of course I did because they had offered me $10, guys. Can't beat that. So I go over there, we start talking, and I realize that he's actually really nice. And he's really hot. I never really saw what he looked like because he was always wearing hoodies during school. Anyways, we started hanging out more, and eventually he said that he liked me and we started dating. Relationship seemed pretty perfect. Well, 6 months in, I think he started to trust me more because he had told me about this one group of girls that he absolutely hated. This group of girls just happened to be my friends. I didn't tell him that I was friends with these girls because they were considered controversial. Like for part 2.
So this one time I had to stay at my grandma's because my dad was on vacation. And I was having a huge box of clothes come in, and I was not about to have these hoes stolen, so I had my friend stop by to put them inside. So I called my friend up and I was like, hey, can you tell me when you get to my house and let me know when you put the package in? She's like, I got you, shawty. I was like, bet, girl. So around 10 minutes later, I got a call from her freaking out. She was like, Kayla, is there anybody at your house? I was like, no, my dad's on vacation and I'm at my grandma's. She said, no, Kayla, there is somebody at your house right now. So I start freaking out. I'm like, girl, what do you mean? And she said she saw someone walk across this huge window and then my dad's lights turned on. So I start freaking out. I'm like, what did you see walk across the window? Like, who did it look like? And she said it was just a black, tall figure that walked across that window. And around 5 minutes of being on the phone, freaking out, she said my dad's lights turned off again. Eventually, me and my grandma drove by the house to make sure nobody was there, and of course, nobody was in my house. And it only gets worse.
This is why it's better to have one friend that you hang out with regularly instead of having a big group of friends. And trust me, you're going to want to listen to this story time. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was kind of going through an identity crisis, and low-key still am. I went to a predominantly white school for the majority of my life. So let's just say I was extremely whitewashed. It was one of those times in my life where if a white person said the N-word around me, I would just laugh. Not because I didn't know it was wrong, but because I wanted to be accepted and I wanted to be like everybody else, and I seeked validation. Sophomore year was really when I started to become who I am today. I wanted to learn way more about my culture and my background. So I started becoming friends with people from other schools that are more diverse. Eventually, I met this group of girls. And I thought these girls were going to be the sweetest girls I would ever meet. Now, this friend group was serving flavor. I'm talking diverse to the T. One night, we decided that we were going to spend the night at one of the girls' houses. Let's call this girl Sally. I kept getting lost on the way to Sally's house, and I thought it was because I didn't know the area that well. Keep in mind, that's what I thought was the reason. I get there and we watch like 4 or 5 movies before I end up falling asleep. And when I wake up, I was in a room full of grown-ass men staring at me.
Story time about how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 6th grade. This all happened on a Tuesday night. So I had school the next day. Well, my dad had went to work earlier in the day. Well, around 10 o'clock at night, we hadn't heard from my dad all day, which was super weird for him because he was always home around 10 o'clock. And even if he wasn't, he still would have kept in contact with us and let us know where he was at. So at this point, my family and I were really scared, and we're thinking that something happened to him. I was calling and texting him, my mom was calling and texting him. My whole family was pretty much trying to get a hold of him. Like, we had called all the hospitals to see if he was there. We called police stations to see if he might have been in jail or if they had his last name in the system. So nobody had heard or seen from him. So we all went to sleep that night hoping that he would show up in the morning. So the next day after I got home from school, my mom came home from work and she had told me about this phone call that she got. Like for part 2.
2 of how I got robbed by my sister's boyfriend. Like I said, a group of guys were after us and tried to take our Halloween candy. When I pushed one of the guys away, someone pulls a strap out on me, and it's Tony. I was so scared at that moment, I literally peed my pants. I really thought that that was my last day. Then he snatches the blanket off of me and was like, oh, so you must think you tough. And I said no, and he said,
hope you guys liked this video and found it helpful. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. It does help support us, and let's know what videos you guys want to see.